How impressed were you by Blaney's performance at Phoenix?
I was very impressed, and I think that this sends a message that I know what you guys were talking about on the pre-race show yesterday a little bit as well. We've kind of thought of Ford as the number three manufacturer this year behind Chevrolet and Toyota. Certainly not a huge deal behind, obviously, winning a handful of races here and there, but just seemed like they were missing a little bit of the magic that Chevy and Toyota had, and we weren't sure if they were going to be able to capitalize when it got time to this point of the year. And they certainly were able to do just that with Ryan Blaney and Team Penske today. The second consecutive championship for Team Penske, the 44th championship. I just noticed that tweet going out a couple hours ago for that entire organization across all the series that they compete in. So very storied history there. Ryan Blaney is now a part of that. It is thoroughly deserved. And he had to go head to head with, as what the guys were saying on the NBC broadcast, somebody who is oftentimes floated out with his name in the conversation for best driver in the world right now. Whether or not that's an accurate statement is, I guess, up to you in terms of where you rank NASCAR Cup in terms of the different disciplines and series out there. But there is no denying Kyle Larson is an incredibly talented racing driver, and Ryan Blaney went head to head with him and beat him straight up. A thoroughly deserving, I guess, not race victory. We'll get into that here a little bit later on in the show. Because it's taken a race victory, and I think Ryan Blaney thought he was going to take a race victory with how hard he was racing Ross Chastain there in the closing laps, but nonetheless did everything he needed to do to win the championship. And again, coming from a guy that does not like this format, that doesn't mean I can't sit back and give credit where it's due and call Ryan Blaney a deserving champion, because he did everything he needed to do according to the system and rules that he was given.
Hi, Dylan. YRB, baby. That's right. Ryan Blaney won the championship. And word of the day for me is perseverance, because Ryan Blaney had to continue to fight this car. He did not like this car from the start of this race. He was mad on the radio. He kept having to get by Kyle Larson to keep getting past William Byron. He just never gave up. And there was that point, he was super aggressive with Ross Chastain and Martin Truex Jr. for this lead. He did not need to win this race, which he did not. But there was a point he was like 3 seconds ahead of Larson and Byron, just fighting so hard to get that lead from Chastain, and just never stopped. And as a viewer, it's just like, what are you doing, Ryan? Because you don't need to do this. You might get yourself wrecked. He made contact with, I believe it was Truex or Chastain, one of the two, but he never stopped. Even when the Kyle Busch caution came out, it seemed like things might be over, because we saw what this happened in 2021 when Kyle Larson won his championship. And it happened again. Larson, the 5 team, they had a better pit stop. And the 12 team was just slower all day long, pretty much. But Blaney persevered. He still managed to beat who Ben, as you said, is, many say, Larson might be the best driver of the current era, just overall. And Blaney still managed to get by him, who he was angrily behind all day long. That was like the theme of the day, which is Blaney can't get by Larson. Well, he did it late in this race. He goes on to win the championship. I'm so impressed with his performance, because there were times I'm like, you're driving over your head a little bit, but no, he won the championship, and so impressive. Like, this is a new Ryan Blaney. I've said that the past couple of weeks. We are living in a new Ryan Blaney era right now.
Is Blaney the biggest surprise champion in this playoff format?
First, thank you to Adam for the congratulations. I am a big Blaney fan. I really appreciate that. But I don't think he's the biggest surprise. I really don't. I don't know who I necessarily would consider that. I guess 2020 with Chase Elliott. I mean, Elliott was good that year, because I think the bigger surprise that year was Harvick not winning it. But I mean, Blaney's championship, he had better stats than Joey Logano did a year ago going into the finale race. And Blaney also won the championship. So I wouldn't say he's the biggest champion. I would say he was more of an underdog that ended up winning it. But a lot of people still called him the favorites. I don't know if you can call him underdog, but I don't know. I don't think he's the biggest surprise, just because of how he's pretty much on par with both of Logano's championships from that have happened recently. I would still say 2020 was the biggest surprise with this format.
I think Blaney was the biggest surprise of the four, at least going into the playoffs, based on the full season performance of each of the championship four. I think Blaney, and again, I know that this is not an exact science. I know people don't like when they do this, but Racing Reference still tracks it, so take that for what it's worth. I think Blaney was sixth of the non-playoff standings, if you will, was each of the other three in the championship four ahead of him. But again, I know the racing would be different, and it's not an exact science or metric, so don't worry there. But I'm with you, Alex. I think the biggest surprise in 2020 was anybody other than Kevin Harvick winning that one. So whoever ended up with that one was going to be a bit of a surprise based on how dominant Harvick was that year. In terms of who's the biggest surprise ever, I would maybe lean Logano's 18 championship, just because kind of the whole big three and me mantra that he had going into that Homestead race, and all the talk about Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, and Kevin Harvick that year. But I think Jimmy Johnson in 2016 actually might be the biggest surprise based on how his full season performance was wrapping up. And then when he got into the playoffs, winning the opening race in the round of 12, winning the opening race in the round of 8 in Martinsville to lock in his spot in championship 4, and then not really performing at Texas and Phoenix, but then going out and being in the right place at the right time. It looked like it looked like Carl Edwards was going to win that championship, and then Dylan Lupton, of all people, loses a tire, brings out a caution, and obviously we all know what happened next with the accident there that ultimately was the final moment of Carl Edwards' NASCAR Cup Series career. We didn't know it at the time, but that led to him stepping away very suddenly in the offseason and calling it a career much earlier than we expected. Jimmy Johnson was there to pick it up and swoop in and pick up his 7th and ultimately last championship. I think based on how that race played out, I would say Jimmy Johnson, even though he's a great champion of a sport, one of our greatest champions ever, his 7th championship to me might be the most unexpected and therefore biggest surprise of the last decade here in this playoff era.
Team Penske winning back-to-back championships. They didn't get their first NASCAR championship until 2012 with Keselowski. They now have 4. Like within the past decade plus a year, like that's really remarkable for Team Penske, and as well as their success over on the IndyCar side. And Team Penske, they also got the Indianapolis 500 win this year, a NASCAR championship. And then last year, they swept the IndyCar and NASCAR championships. Team Penske's on a roll right now, and quite frankly, I don't know if anyone's going to be able to stop them. We'll have to wait and see.
But I just want to go back, Alex, to the point that you just made there. They had to wait until 2012 with Keselowski. Think of who drove for Team Penske. Rusty Wallace, NASCAR champion. Kurt Busch, NASCAR champion. Ryan Newman, Daytona 500 winner, used to win every pole, every weekend, won a bunch of races. I mean, it's not like they didn't have great drivers and future Hall of Famers driving their cars. It was kind of surprising to me that, realizing as a kid when Keselowski won it several years ago, that that's the first time they'd ever won a Cup championship. I would have thought for sure they had a Cup championship in that team's history. But they had to wait a long time to win one, and now that they've won one, they've won 4 now, like you mentioned, with 3 out of the last 6, if I'm doing the math correctly, with Logano's 2 and now Blaney's today. Just a remarkable stretch for that team.